The courtroom was alive with quiet tension. Papers rustling, footsteps echoing against tile, and the low hum of whispered anticipation. Judge Victoria Monroe sat tall behind the bench, adjusting her robe as she reached for the next case file. Another name, another charge, another day spent trying to keep her heart from getting involved. She flipped open the folder. Assault, robbery, resisting arrest. Her eyes skimmed over the summary until they landed on the name. Caleb Brooks. Her breath caught. Before she could even process the thought, the bailiff announced it out loud. The state of Louisiana versus Caleb Brooks. And then, he appeared, escorted by 2 deputies, his wrists cuffed, ankles shackled, orange jumpsuit creased at the knees. His hair was grayer now, face worn from time and trouble. But his eyes, those deep brown eyes, were exactly the same. Victoria froze. It was him. The boy who used to race her down the bayou on rusted bikes. The one who gave her a locket with a plastic jewel and promised they'd always have each other's backs. That was 30 years ago. Now he was just another defendant, except he wasn't. Not to her. Their eyes met. Just for a second. Long enough to say everything and nothing. Then he looked away. Her heart pounded behind the polished wood of her bench. But her voice stayed even, professional. "Mr. Brooks," she said, "you stand accused of assault and robbery. How do you plead?" He looked up slowly. His voice cracked, but the words were clear. "Not guilty, Your Honor." The courtroom was quiet, but Victoria barely noticed. Her thoughts had already slipped away, into the past, into the summer heat of Hammond, Louisiana, where 2 children once dared to believe they could outrun the rules of the world. They were both wrong. She gripped the gavel tighter. The weight of it felt different now. She was supposed to be impartial, trained to detach, conditioned to judge on fact, not feeling. But how do you separate justice from memory? How do you pass judgment on someone who once swore they'd never let the world break you? "Proceed," she said finally, voice barely above a whisper. But inside her, everything trembled. This wasn't just a case. This wasn't just a man. This was the past, dragged into the courtroom in handcuffs. And for the first time in her career, Judge Victoria Monroe didn't know if she could trust herself to hold the line. Long before the gavel, before the orange jumpsuit, before the courtroom silence, there was Hammond, Louisiana, a quiet, split-down-the-middle kind of town, where the lines between privilege and struggle weren't just visible, they were painted into the streets. Victoria Monroe lived on one side of those lines. Caleb Brooks lived on the other. Her world was Sunday dresses, porch swings, and rules written in cursive. His was cracked sidewalks, secondhand everything, and a mother who worked 3 jobs to keep food on the table. But they met. By accident, like most important things. Victoria was 9, too curious for her own good, wandering near the train tracks behind the post office when her foot slipped into a drainage ditch. She cried out, panicked, not hurt, but stuck. Then came the voice. "You need help or just attention?" She turned. A boy, maybe 10, stood nearby, fishing pole in one hand, the other holding a sandwich wrapped in wax paper. That was Caleb. He offered her a hand without asking for anything back, and from that moment on, they were inseparable. Bike rides through the cane fields, chalk drawings on the church sidewalk, long talks under the rusted water tower, dreaming of cities with no fences, no whispers, no rules about who could sit beside whom. But dreams don't last long in towns like Hammond. Not when the world watches 2 kids, one black, one white, laughing too loud, sitting too close. It happened fast. One summer afternoon, they were sitting on Victoria's front steps, sharing a popsicle, when her father's voice cracked through the air like a shotgun. Inside, now. Caleb froze. He didn't argue, didn't run, just stood. Victoria looked at him, confused, hurt, helpless. "I'll see you around," Caleb said quietly. He didn't. His family moved that fall. No forwarding address, no goodbye. Victoria buried the memory under college, ambition, and 1,000 courtroom cases. But some ghosts don't stay buried. What she didn't know was what happened after he left. Caleb dropped out in 10th grade, worked construction, took care of his sick mother, lived paycheck to paycheck, and every time life kicked him down, he got back up. But the world didn't forget who he was, or who they thought he was. Stopped for walking home late, fired for asking questions, accused because someone else fit the same vague description. He wasn't perfect, but he wasn't a criminal either. He was tired of being misunderstood, tired of a system that didn't care where he came from or what he carried on his back. And now, after years of trying to stay afloat, here he was, in front of the one person who once saw the best in him, the one who now held the power to end everything. And the question that haunted them both, would she still see him? By the second day of trial, the courtroom had turned cold. Not from the air conditioning, but from something quieter, sharper, indifference. The type of silence that seeps in when everyone's already decided who's guilty and who's just pretending to be innocent. Caleb sat still at the defense table, hands folded, jaw clenched. He didn't speak much, didn't move much. But his eyes, they told stories no file ever could. Across the aisle, the prosecutor, Vincent Lang, stood tall and rehearsed. His voice was smooth, his hair perfect, his tone sharp as glass. To the jury, he said, "This isn't complicated." He walked toward them slowly, holding up a photo, grainy footage from a security cam. "This man," he pointed, "was caught leaving the scene of the crime. He was found with cash. The clerk identified him. This is about law and order. Simple, clean, tight bow on a dirty story." Victoria Monroe watched from the bench, trying to still her heartbeat. Lang was good, too good. He knew how to bend truth just enough, how to layer confidence on top of doubt until nobody asked questions. Then came the police report. Victoria had read it twice that morning. The arresting officer, Deputy Grant Meadows, claimed he recognized the suspect while driving past a gas station 3 blocks from the scene. No search warrant, no body cam, no witnesses. Just a hunch, and that was enough. Victoria stared at the document in her hand, bile rising in her throat. This wasn't justice. It was a template, a tired copy-paste of too many nights. Too many black men stopped for matching a description. Too many stories ending the same way. Lang sat down. Then Lisa Jennings stood up. The defense attorney was young, underfunded, and clearly outnumbered, but not outmatched. Her voice cut through the stillness like a blade. "My client has no criminal record, no history of violence. He works construction. He was walking home." She turned to the jury. "What if that had been your brother, your father, your son?" The jury shifted uncomfortably. Some looked down. Some looked away. And Victoria knew what that meant. Doubt. Small but real. Deputy Meadows took the stand. His uniform crisp. His story tighter than it should have been. Lisa asked questions. He dodged. She pressed harder. He snapped. "I knew it was him," he barked. "How?" Lisa asked. "Because I've seen him around." No fingerprint, no weapon, no confession. Just history, just proximity, just him. Victoria looked over at Caleb, and something inside her cracked, because she had spent her career believing the system could work. And now, watching this unfold, she wasn't so sure anymore. It started with a pause. Not a long one, just a beat, barely noticeable. But Victoria felt it deep in her chest, because when Deputy Meadows stepped off the stand, and Caleb stood to take it, The energy in the courtroom shifted, like the room itself was holding its breath. Caleb took the oath, sat down. His hands were steady, but his eyes flicked once to Victoria. She looked back, neutral, stoic. But something in her stomach twisted. This wasn't just testimony. This was memory on trial. The defense began. "Mr. Brooks," Lisa said gently, "can you walk us through what happened that night?" Caleb nodded once. "I was walking home. Same route I take every day. I didn't stop anywhere. I didn't speak to anyone. And when you were stopped by Deputy Meadows, I asked why I was being detained. He didn't answer. Just told me to put my hands up." Lisa paced slowly. "Did you resist?" "No, ma'am." "Did he read you your rights?" A pause. "No." Victoria's fingers gripped the edge of her bench. Lang stood up, already shaking his head. "Mr. Brooks," he said with a smirk, "you expect this jury to believe you were just taking an innocent stroll while a robbery happened 2 blocks away?" Caleb didn't blink. "I expect this jury to listen." Lang scoffed. "Let me rephrase. Did you or did you not have cash in your pocket when arrested?" "I had $22 from my paycheck, and the clerk ID'd you." Caleb turned to the jury. "I've never been in that store in my life." Lang raised an eyebrow. No further questions. He sat down, smug, satisfied. But then Victoria spoke. "Mr. Brooks," she said, her voice clear. "One question from the bench." The courtroom hushed. Caleb straightened, looked directly at her. "Why do you think you were arrested?" His jaw tensed. "Because I fit the story they wanted to tell." Silence. Heavy, raw, uncomfortable. Victoria nodded once. No expression, but her heart was racing. Because deep down, she knew he was right. And as the bailiff called for recess, she realized this trial wasn't about what Caleb had done. It was about what the system refused to see. The courtroom was quiet when they returned from recess. Too quiet. As if everyone sensed the ground beneath them was about to shift. Lisa Jennings stood slowly, a folder in hand, thicker than before, heavier. She didn't look at the prosecutor. She didn't look at Victoria. She looked straight at the jury. "Your Honor," she said, her voice steady. "With the court's permission, I'd like to introduce new evidence, recently submitted by a third party." Victoria raised an eyebrow. "Proceed." Lisa walked toward the projection screen at the front of the room. Her footsteps echoed like drum beats. "I'd like to present security footage from a nearby mechanic's garage, located across the street from the convenience store." Vincent Lang was already on his feet. "Objection. This footage was not submitted during discovery. It was obtained this morning, Your Honor," Lisa countered. The business owner was unaware he even had a recording until yesterday evening. Victoria paused. "Overruled. Show us what you've got." The screen flickered. Then came grainy black and white video. A timestamp, 9:16 p.m., a view of the sidewalk, and a man, clearly visible, wearing a red hoodie. He rushes past the camera. Seconds later, police lights flash across the lens. The courtroom leaned in. Lisa clicked to the next frame, then another. At 9:21 p.m., 5 minutes after the red-hooded man disappeared off screen, Caleb Brooks entered from the opposite side. Different angle, walking slowly, hands in pockets, no hoodie. 2 different men, 2 different directions, 2 different timelines. Lang stood slowly, lips parted, but no sound came out. Lisa turned. "This footage confirms Mr. Brooks was not the man seen fleeing the crime scene. He arrived 5 minutes later, from a direction that makes it physically impossible for him to be the perpetrator." Victoria leaned forward, her heart thudding. The jury was frozen. Lisa pulled one final sheet from her folder. "Furthermore, the fingerprints recovered from the cash register did not match my client's. A recent forensic recheck Rush this morning. Shows a partial match to an unknown individual. Lang's voice cracked. This is circumstantial. Lisa didn't flinch. This is exculpatory, and you knew it. Victoria's gaze snapped toward Lang. He didn't meet her eyes. The room felt heavier than ever, because this wasn't just a mistake. It was a cover-up. And as Lisa returned to her seat, the courtroom was no longer a place of procedure. It had become a battlefield. Between truth and the stories, power tells itself to sleep at night. Vincent Lang didn't sleep that night. Not because of guilt, he didn't believe in that word, but because he knew the tide was turning. And when powerful men feel it slipping, they push back. The next morning, just before court resumed, a thick manila envelope landed on the judge's bench. No return address. Victoria opened it. Inside was a complaint, filed anonymously, accusing her of bias, claiming she had a personal connection to the defendant. Her blood ran cold. She looked up. Lang was watching her from the other side of the room. Not smirking, not gloating, just waiting. The threat wasn't subtle. If she didn't back down, he would drag her with him. Her hand trembled for just a moment, then stilled. Fine, he wanted a war? She'd bring the fire. The court came to order. Lang stood first. "Your Honor," he said, voice syrupy with false professionalism. "Before we proceed, I must raise a concern." "Go ahead," Victoria said, tone flat. "I've received word that you may have had prior familiarity with the defendant. I believe, in the interest of justice, you should consider recusal." Gasps stirred the room. The reporters leaned in. Victoria stared at Lang, her jaw tight. She could lie, deny it, or she could do what the system rarely did, tell the truth. She rose from her seat. "I did know Mr. Brooks. A long time ago. We were children, neighbors." The courtroom buzzed. "But I have no ongoing relationship with him. I have not spoken to him in over 20 years. My rulings have been grounded in law and evidence. And if anyone in this courtroom believes otherwise..." She looked at Lang, eyes like steel. "You're welcome to prove it." Lang blinked. Silence stretched, taut and dangerous. Then he sat down, hard. Victoria remained standing. "For the record," she said, "any further attempts to intimidate this bench will not go unnoticed." The gavel struck once. It was louder than thunder. Lisa gave her the slightest nod. The jury, once unsure, now looked resolute. The courtroom had stopped being Lang's stage. It now belonged to justice, and those brave enough to defend it. And outside, on the courthouse steps, cameras clicked and journalists whispered, because something had shifted, not just in the case, but in the way people saw the truth. It wasn't hidden anymore. It was fighting back. The jury returned after just under 3 hours. Their footsteps were slow, deliberate, and when the four-person stood, paper in hand, the entire room fell breathless. In the case of the state of Louisiana versus Caleb Brooks, we find the defendant not guilty. The silence cracked, first into gasps, then into a rising tide of murmurs. Caleb didn't move, not at first. His fingers gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white. His eyes didn't believe it until Victoria nodded. "You're free to go," she said. It took a second for the words to land. Then his shoulders slumped, not in defeat, but in release, like a man finally allowed to breathe. Lisa exhaled next to him, her composure holding barely. Lang sat frozen, blinking at the verdict as if it were in another language. Victoria struck the gavel. "This court is adjourned." But the story didn't end when the judge stepped off the bench. Outside, a storm had already begun. The press waited. Reporters shouted questions. The footage of Lang's misconduct had been leaked by someone inside the courthouse. Maybe a clerk. Maybe someone fed up. The footage of the hoodie, The incomplete fingerprint report, the unsigned evidence transfer sheet, all of it. By the time Lang stepped out of the building, cameras were already rolling. Reporters swarmed. "Mr. Lang, did you suppress evidence? Are you being investigated by the bar? Will you be resigning?" He didn't answer, didn't look up. He just pushed through the crowd, alone for the first time in years. Inside, Caleb stood in front of Victoria. He didn't say thank you. He said something better. "You believed me." She nodded once. I listened. That was enough. But as the courthouse emptied, Victoria lingered. Her name was trending online. News anchors debated her choices. Some praised her integrity. Others accused her of crossing lines. The truth? She didn't care, because she knew what it had cost. She had stared down a system that preferred comfort over truth. And now, she wasn't sure it would ever look at her the same. That night, she sat alone on her front porch. No robe, no gavel, just the quiet hum of cicadas and a glass of wine in her hand. She thought of James, of the dusty streets, of the promises under magnolia trees, and for the first time in a long while, she let herself feel the weight of what was lost and what was reclaimed. Justice had won, but it had come with a price, and she would carry both for the rest of her life. Weeks passed, but the story didn't fade. In fact, it grew. Victoria Hayes, once a quiet figure behind the bench, had become a symbol. Not for controversy, not for fame, but for courage. Students at law schools debated her rulings. Civil rights groups sent letters of thanks. One even called her the judge who remembered her humanity. She didn't reply. She wasn't interested in the spotlight. She had seen what it did to people. But one morning, a small envelope arrived at her office. No return address, just her name, handwritten in ink. Inside was a folded piece of notebook paper. The writing was crooked, letters uneven. "My mom said you saved my dad. She said you listened when no one else would. I want to be like that too. MJ." Victoria stared at the letter for a long time, and then, for the first time since the trial, she let the tears fall. Because sometimes, justice isn't measured in headlines. It's measured in small hands writing big hopes. Across town, Caleb Brooks sat in a small coffee shop. No headlines followed him. No cameras. Just peace. He had found work at a local nonprofit, helping people like the man he used to be. Misunderstood, mislabeled, underestimated. He didn't speak much about the trial. But sometimes, late at night, he'd sit with a notebook and sketch the courtroom from memory. Not the walls, not the chairs, the people. The woman who refused to bend. The lawyer who refused to be out-talked. And the judge who remembered who he was. One evening, he passed that courtroom again. Empty now, quiet. He stopped at the steps, looked up at the pillars, and for the first time, he didn't feel small. He felt seen, and maybe that was enough. Far from the courtroom, a law student named Jordan scrolled through an article about the trial on her cracked phone. She didn't know Caleb. She'd never met Victoria Hayes. But something about their story stuck with her, because she'd grown up hearing that people like her wouldn't make it through law school. And now, she was on the dean's list. She closed the article, opened her notes, and kept reading. Because justice didn't need a robe. It needed voices, and she'd decided hers would be one of them. Back in her home, Victoria placed the child's letter in a small wooden box. Next to it, an old photo. 2 kids under a magnolia tree, smiling like they owned the world. She closed the lid slowly, not to forget, but to remember. Justice, she had learned, isn't just a system, it's a memory, a choice, a voice that refuses to go silent. And sometimes, it starts with a childhood promise that still echoes, years later, through a gavel strike and a trembling voice that says, I believe you. If today's story made you pause, if it stirred your anger, if it reminded you of something you've seen or lived through, then you already understand why this matters. Because justice doesn't always arrive with a gavel. Sometimes it shows up in the form of someone who refuses to stay silent, someone who remembers, and someone who decides to speak up, no matter the cost. Here on KaYi, we tell those stories, the stories that make you feel, make you think, and sometimes make you rise. Don't let this be just another case lost in time. Hit subscribe, turn on that bell, and walk with us through the stories that were never supposed to be told, but must be, because the next story might just awaken a generation.